Hello everyone. In this lesson, I will be going through with you data gathering techniques used in GI related to the topic of coasts. Basically, here are the lesson objectives of what we will be going through today. We will be recapping on the purpose of gathering data. After that, we'll be looking at the methods to gather data in relation to coastal GIs. And lastly, we will wrap up with the conclusion and considerations. By the end of the lesson, these are the things that you must be able to do. Firstly, you must be able to explain why we must gather data and the things we need to think about before selecting our methods. Secondly, you need to be able to describe, list and explain the different methods available and when to use each of these methods. Without further ado, let's continue. In a nutshell, GI is concerned with uncovering the relationships between two or more variables in the phenomena that we observe in the world around us. This can be related to factors that influence the rate of waves crashing on the shore, or even the things that influences the decisions that tourists make when visiting an attraction. Here, I will provide a layman example wherein I try to find the relationship between fruits left out in the open and the number of fruit flies within the vicinity. Based on my hypothesis that the more fruits I leave out, the more flies I will attract, I need data to prove whether my hypothesis can be proven or has to be rejected. Based on this, I would have to collect the appropriate data. However, the question now is, can I gather data about anything and everything? Well, the answer is no, we can't. The data must be related to the variable mentioned in the hypothesis. So in this case, what we need data about is actually about the number of flies and the number of fruits that are left out in the open. So the data that you gather must be related to your hypothesis. Additionally, I need to select a method that will allow me to gather the information that I desire, which is tracking down the number of flies and tracking down the number of fruits that I leave out in the open. This will be what we will be going through today. So remember to keep this in mind. How do I gather, what kind of methods should I use, and what kind of data does the method that I've selected actually capture? Here I present to you big idea 1 in relation to today's subject matter. You already know the first two, but what I need to bring to your attention is the last point. Our methods must collect the data that we have identified to be relevant in our hypotheses. If we select the wrong methods, we may end up collecting irrelevant data that does not approve or reject our hypothesis. This then leads to the nightmare of redoing our entire GI because we had chosen the wrong methods in the first place. Therefore, from the onset, after formulating your hypothesis, you need to make sure that your selected methods are actually appropriate and they capture the data that you desire or you intended to use to prove or reject the hypothesis that you have. So we are done with the first part of this lesson. I hope all of you have understood what we have went through thus far. If you don't, then rewind the video and make sure that you understand everything before moving on. Remember, this isn't a race and you should make sure that you understand rather than memorize this information. So go through this video a couple of times before moving on to the next part. Okay students, we are now moving to the next part of the lesson, which is uncovering the different methods to gather data when doing coastal GIs. To guide your learning, we will be addressing two questions, namely, how do I gather data and when do I use each of these methods? By the end of this section, you must be able to list and explain the different methods as well as when to use them. So when I say list and explain, you need to be able to tell me how to carry out these methods when you're out in the field. Alright, just to recap big idea 1, the method that you select, firstly, How do you select a method? It actually depends on what you are investigating. So when you're selecting a method, ask yourself, what am I trying to find out? And then also ask yourself, does my selected method allow me to gather data that I'm interested in finding out? Let's look at an example from the topic of housing that you have previously done. If I'm trying to find out if residents are satisfied with public housing in Tampines, I'm trying to find out their opinions and perceptions about housing in Tampines. So if I'm trying to capture this data, which is opinions and perceptions, what kinds of methods can I use? Well, over here we are presented with a dilemma. We have two methods that we have been taught in class. Firstly, interviews and surveys. Secondly, field sketch. Which method do you think I should use in order to collect this data that will be used to reject or prove my hypothesis? Well, if you said that interviews and survey is the method that I should use, then you are absolutely correct. Basically, through interviews, I can get to know people's sentiments. However, field sketches do not allow me to do this. Therefore, the data gathering methods must be able to gather data that you're interested in finding out. If I just do a field sketch, it would not allow me to explore the opinions and perceptions of the people who are living in Tampines, as well as whether they feel that they are satisfied with public housing in Tampines. Alright, so then that leads us to the question, what are the kinds of data that I may need to collect when doing GI about coasts? Well, again, this depends on your hypotheses. It depends on what you are studying. But generally, your hypothesis could explore the following when you're doing GI about coasts. Firstly, you can explore wave characteristics, longshore drift, and impacts on sediment transport, and try to find a relationship between these different variables. So when you're exploring these things, the type of data that you need will be with regards to the longshore drift, wave characteristics, beach profile that prove that sediments are being moved around. So we will explore how to actually find this data in the later sections. So another hypothesis which you could actually generate with regards to coastal GIs will be about sediment characteristics and distribution across beach profile. So where do we find larger sediments? Where do we find smaller sediments? Is there a relationship between the two? How do I explain how they are distributed across the beach profile? So the type of data that you need when you're trying to do this type of research would be sediment characteristics across a transect or across a beach profile. Well, these are two other areas which you could choose to explore when doing your coastal GI, the differences or changes in beach profile across space, and also impacts of human management strategies on sediment transport. The basic idea that I need you to remember is that based on your hypothesis, you need to select the correct method that will allow you to gather the correct data that can prove or reject your hypothesis. Please do not forget this. Alright, so just to reinforce what I just said, these are the possible types of data that you need to collect. Remember, this list is non-exhaustive. There might be other types of data that you need to collect. So firstly, you may be asked to collect data about beach profile and gradient across space, sediment characteristics and distribution across space, wind direction and speed, human perceptions of coast, wave characteristics, longshore drift, and the rate of sediment transport. Just to bring to your attention, when I mention across space, it basically, what I'm referring to is how does the distribution of something, or how does the shape of something differ from one place to another. That is what I'm saying when I'm saying across space. It's between two different places or spaces. Alright, so now that we know the types of data that we may be required to gather, let's find out how we can gather this data. Basically, in the next slide, I'll be showing you the different techniques that we have that are available to geographers when they do coastal GI. However, I need to make it clear that each of these techniques requires a video on its own in order to explain how you do these different methods. Don't worry, I will be producing these videos too. Alright, so when you are trying to gather data about the following, so let's say for example I'm trying to find out about wave characteristics, what I need to do is I need to analyze wave height, wavelength, frequency, steepness, and period. So these the lighter boxes are the method, the darker boxes are the type of data that you're trying to find. So when I'm trying to find, for example, changes in beach slope and gradient, what I will do as a method would be to do beach profile and gradient analysis using a clinometer and ranging pole. When I'm trying to find out information about sediment characteristics and distribution, what I will do is I will use the method of sediment analysis. If I'm trying to gather data about longshore drift, I would use the method of observing the travel path of floating objects. So lastly, you see here evaluating coastal management. It's in yellow because we will not be covering this. However, it will be in another future video. However, these four lighter boxes are the more important methods that I want you to be able to familiarize with. Alright, so I am looking forward to seeing you all in the future videos. Basically, each of these methods will be explained in an individual video, so as to ensure that everything is explained in detail, and also to ensure that you can easily select the videos which you are unsure rather than going through one whole long video. I will be producing a dedicated video to each of these methods. So just make sure you familiarize yourself with what we are doing. Look at that overview slide again to understand the different methods available, and I'll see you in the future videos. Thank you for tuning in.